stories for bedtime
and car time and playtime.
And anytime you want to hear how much Jesus loves you in all this world.
Even little birds.
Hi, I'm Pastor Sarah at St. Paul Lutheran Church in Davenport, Iowa. Welcome to this podcast where we tell stories told just for kids, and kids at heart. Every week we tell a story about Jesus from the Bible. And for this podcast, you are going to need to bring your imagination. We are going to imagine that there was a little bird in all those Bible stories, a little bird who was friends with Jesus, a little bird who saw all the stuff that Jesus did and heard all the things that Jesus said. Last week, Little Bird and Jesus played with a whole bunch of kids. I hope that you got to play a lot since the last time that we were together. This week, we'll hear a story about siblings, two sisters and a brother who were friends with Jesus. There are a lot of big feelings in this story, so listen for them. Here is
Little Bird and Jesus with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus.
Jesus had a lot of friends. Not just Little Bird, and not just those fishermen, and not just you, but lots and lots more friends. One family was particularly close to Jesus, and in that family there were two sisters, Mary and Martha, and one brother, Lazarus. Well, one day, something really very sad happened. Lazarus got sick, really sick. This was a long time ago, before people knew about things like medicine and vaccines and bacteria and viruses. There were no hospitals or ambulances or lots of trained nurses or doctors. It was much more dangerous to be sick in Jesus' time than in our time. And so when Lazarus got sick, the sisters knew that their brother was not going to get better. They knew he was going to die. And so Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus and to other friends to tell all the sad news. Of course, back in Jesus' time, not only were there no ambulances, but they didn't have cell phones or the internet to send messages. Those things hadn't been invented yet. The sisters probably wrote a note for someone to carry all the way to Jesus on foot. And so it took a long time for Jesus to get the message and then to walk all the way to Bethany, where Lazarus, Mary, and Martha lived. When they were still quite a distance off, as they were walking, Jesus looked at Little Bird, who was flying overhead, and said, "Little Bird, fly as fast as you can to my friends. Tell them I'm on my way." And so that is what Little Bird did. She flew as fast as her tiny sparrow wings could carry her. But as she got closer, she didn't hear the usual laughter and joy that came from her friend's house. Instead, she saw a crowd of people giving one another hugs, crying. Right away, Little Bird knew that they were too late. She flew right over to Martha, who held Little Bird in her hands. Little Bird saw the sorrow in her eyes. She wished she could do something, say something to make her feel better. But she just nuzzled Martha close, showing her love. Sometimes there aren't magic words to say to make someone feel better. Instead, just being with someone when they are sad, that's enough. Little Bird's ears caught the sounds of voices by the gate, and she knew it was Jesus and the disciples. And the sadness in Martha's face switched to anger. Martha stormed to the gate as Jesus walked in, and she cried, "Lazarus is dead. And Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." But Jesus didn't say anything. He just wrapped his arms around his friend as she cried. And soon her anger faded away, and she whispered to Jesus, "Still, I trust you, Jesus. I know that you are the one God sent to help us and to love us." Little Bird watched, and she flew back to the house looking for Mary, Martha's sister. Finally, she found her in a quiet corner alone, wrapped up in a ball, her arms around her legs, her face buried in her arms. Little Bird gently landed on her shoulder, and Little Bird looked up, and her face was streaked with tears. "Is Jesus here?" she asked Little Bird, who nodded. Mary stood up and ran to where Jesus was, and she was joined by all the other people who were there. When Jesus saw Mary with her tears streaming down her cheeks and the rest of them with her also sobbing, Jesus' heart broke. He was so moved. And then Jesus began to weep. Little Bird had seen Jesus cry before. He'd seen a lot of tough and sad things, but it still made her sad to see her best friend cry. Others noticed this and said, "Look, see how much Jesus loves them." Yes, Little Bird thought, Jesus does love his friends so much. And then Jesus asked his sisters, "Where have you laid Lazarus?" Jesus, Mary, and Martha, and all the people who loved Lazarus went to the tomb. Just like now, people in Jesus' time had special places where their loved ones were buried. A long time ago, when someone died, they would wrap up the body of the person who had died in special clothes and fabric, and they would lay them in a little cave like a tomb. And a big stone slab was laid in front of the opening. And that is what the sisters, Mary and Martha, did for Lazarus. When they got to the place where Lazarus was laid, Jesus said to some of the people who were there, "Please, remove the stone." But Mary shook her head. "Jesus, he has already been dead for 4 days. It will surely be so smelly. Are you sure?" Jesus nodded. And so a group of the strongest people rolled away that heavy stone in front of the tomb. And then Jesus said, "Lazarus, come out." And then the most amazing thing happened. Lazarus stepped out of the tomb, walking, breathing. The people were amazed and scared and just plain shocked. Jesus had resuscitated Lazarus. He was alive again. Jesus and his sisters helped unwrap the clothes around Lazarus's legs and arms, and once he was freed, Lazarus hugged Mary, and then Martha, and then Jesus, and then all of them together. The people laughed and danced and sang. Little Bird tweeted a joyful praise and flew all around. Eventually, she spotted Jesus, his face bright with the biggest smile she'd ever seen. This friend of hers had the biggest heart. He felt so deeply, crying with others when they cried and laughing with them in their joy. And Jesus had this power from God like no one had ever seen. Little Bird felt such gratitude that God would give her a friend like Jesus. And Jesus wasn't just a friend to Little Bird, but also to Lazarus and Mary and Martha and this whole world. Now that is a miraculous story. This would be a really fun story to act out. Someone could be Lazarus, and you could wrap them up in blankets and bury them in a cave of pillows. And then someone could be Jesus and say, "Come out!" Or maybe you could simply mimic the emotions people felt throughout this story. You could try on a sad face with a big frown, or scrunch up your eyebrows and your nose in anger, or then relax all your muscles and let out a big sigh of relief, followed by the most excited smile. What other feelings do you think Jesus and his friends felt? It is really sad when people we love die. If you have had someone close to you die, you know that sadness. But we can always remember this truth, that when people die, they are in heaven with Jesus, knowing such goodness and peace and healing and love. And somehow, by God's grace, their love still comes to us. They're still close to us in our hearts and memories. And it helps me to remember this story of Lazarus and how Jesus wept when he was grieving and sad. Jesus understands and knows about being sad. It's okay to feel our feelings in whatever situation we are in. It's okay to be sad or mad or happy or cranky. Those feelings are okay. And sometimes we just need someone to listen to us. Those people can be siblings like Mary and Martha, or friends like Jesus. You might also have a parent or a teacher or a grandparent or neighbor who can stay with you when those feelings are so big and they get to be too much to handle alone. Talk to your grown-ups this week about who helps you when you're sad or scared or angry. Maybe brainstorm a list or draw a picture that you can keep nearby to remind you of those helpers when you need them. And no matter what, when you are feeling big feelings, know that you are not alone, but Jesus is with you and understands always. And that's the end of this episode of Little Bird and Jesus.
Now flap your little wings. Sing a little song.
And remember that to Jesus,
You will always belong.
Thanks for listening to Little Bird and Jesus, a podcast of St. Paul Lutheran Church in Davenport, Iowa. For more information on St. Paul, visit us at stpaulqc.org. Come visit us again next week as Little Bird continues her journey.